She was already dialing when I opened the door. Diane Holloway, 58, HOA president. 6 years of fines under her belt, stood 2 feet inside my doorway with her phone held up so I could see the screen. 911. She had pressed it before I said hello. "I have HOA authority to enter any unit in this subdivision," she said into the phone. "Not to me. To the dispatcher. And the homeowner is refusing." I was holding a coffee mug. I was wearing house slippers. It was 7:42 p.m. on a Tuesday in May, and the woman threatening me had no idea the voice she was about to hear say 911. "What's the address of your emergency belonged to my wife." She tapped her clipboard against my door frame. Orange paper, traffic cone bright. Interior inspection notice. Bylaw section 4.12, dated tomorrow. "You have 10 seconds to step aside," she said, "or I'm telling the operator you're obstructing a lawful inspection." Behind her, 2 HOA board members stood on my lawn with clipboards. One photographed my front window. The other wrote something down. Neither of them looked at me. I didn't say anything. I just looked at the orange paper, and the phone, and the 2 silent witnesses on my lawn, and I thought, "Diane, you picked the worst possible house on this street to bully tonight." The rest you can picture. The doorbell camera 6 inches above her left ear, recording in 1080p with audio. The neighbors pretending not to watch from their own porches. Mrs. Alvarez across the street, watering a plant that did not need watering. Mr. Patel 2 houses down, frozen mid-grocery unload. The whole cul-de-sac suddenly very busy doing very quiet things. "Yes, I need an officer at 1428 Cedar Hollow," Diane was saying into the phone, in the voice she used at board meetings, loud, performative, designed to carry. "I'm the HOA president. The homeowner is refusing a lawful entry. He's hostile." I had not raised my voice. I had not moved. I was, in fact, still holding the coffee. Diane lowered the phone half an inch and looked at me with the expression she used on people who had been late paying fines. "Every house on this street belongs to the association before it belongs to you," she said. "You do well to remember that. I'd lived in that house for 8 years. My wife and I bought it 3 months before we got married. Our names were on the deed in a county office 20 miles away, signed, notarized, filed, recorded. The association did not own my house. The association had never owned my house. The association, technically speaking, did not own the square foot of porch Diane Holloway was standing on. I didn't say any of that. I took a small sip of coffee and watched her threaten me on a county-recorded line. "Officers are coming," she said, smirking. "I suggest you open the door now and save yourself the embarrassment." "I'll wait on my porch, Diane," I said, with my doorbell camera on. The smirk slipped. 1 millimeter. She covered it fast, looked back at her phone, raised her chin, said something else to the dispatcher about my demeanor. But I saw it, the first crack of the night, and there would be many more. Here is what I need you to understand about that moment, because it is the moment the next 6 weeks of her life hung on. Diane thought the phone in her hand was a weapon. She thought 911 was a button you pressed when you wanted the law to come over and confirm you were in charge. She had been pressing that button, in various forms, for 6 years. Fines, liens, threats, notices, 3-2 board votes that always went her way. She had a placard on her SUV she had laminated herself. She had a husband who used to be an attorney. She had a clipboard. She did not have a clue. She did not have a clue that the woman on the other end of that 911 call had heard my voice every morning for 8 years, had married me on a Saturday in April, had texted me 11 minutes ago to say the shift was quiet. She did not have a clue that every word she was speaking, no warrant, no injury, no danger, no authority, was being logged into a county database that would outlive her HOA career by a margin of decades. She thought she was calling the law. She had no idea she was calling my wife. I set the coffee mug down on the little table beside the door. The porch light clicked on automatically. The sun was somewhere behind the maples, low and orange and going. Across the street, Mrs. Alvarez had stopped pretending to water and was openly watching. Diane was still talking, performing for the dispatcher, the neighbors, whatever version of herself she saw in the mirror. I let her talk. The cruiser would arrive in about 9 minutes. Deputy Reyes would step out of it, polite and patient and a complete stranger, and he would ask Diane 3 questions she would not be able to answer correctly. The orange notice on her clipboard would, in approximately 6 weeks, be entered into evidence as Exhibit C. The phone she was holding would, in approximately 55 minutes, become the most expensive object she had ever owned. But all of that was still ahead of us. For now, on a porch I had paid for, in a house she had no right to enter, in front of a street that had been afraid of her for 6 years, and was about to discover it didn't have to be. I just stood there and let her dig. She had brought a clipboard to what she thought was a fight. She had no idea she had walked into a recording. To understand what happened on my porch that Tuesday night, you have to back up 8 years. My wife and I bought 1,428 Cedar Hollow Drive in the spring of 2017, 3 months before we got married. We weren't glamorous buyers. She was a 911 dispatcher coming off 5 years at a smaller county. I was a project manager at a regional engineering firm. We chose the end of Cedar Hollow because the cul-de-sac was quiet, and Megan worked nights and needed to sleep when other people were running lawnmowers. The HOA disclosure was 40 pages. I read it. Most people don't. I'm the kind of person who does, not from paranoia, just because that's how my brain works. Diane Halloway's name appeared on page 2 as a board member. Just a name. 6 months after we closed, she became president. By the end of our first year, I'd received 4 notices. Parking a contractor's truck overnight. A recycling bin still at the curb at 7:15 p.m. Uncontrolled vegetation, a single dandelion. And my favorite, a $75 fine for a wind chime inside my screened porch that Diane had decided was audibly disruptive to neighborhood character from her house 8 doors away. I didn't pay them. I wrote polite letters back, citing the actual bylaw language, pointing out the cited violations didn't exist as written. 3 of the 4 notices quietly vanished. The wind chime fine she let sit. I think she sensed, even then, that I was the wrong kind of homeowner to push too hard on too early, so she pushed everyone else. There are 88 houses on Cedar Hollow. By the time of the porch incident, Diane had fined 41 of them, at least once. Mrs. Alvarez, 2 doors down, had been fined 6 times. She was 72, a widow, on a fixed income, and 3 years ago Diane had decided the shade of blue on her mailbox was non-compliant. It was the same shade as 4 other mailboxes on the street. The other 4 belonged to board members or people Diane liked. Mrs. Alvarez was neither. The fine was $400. Mrs. Alvarez paid it. The week after her husband's funeral, I brought her a casserole, and she told me sitting at her kitchen table at 2 in the afternoon that her biggest fear in the world was that the HOA would take the home she and her husband had bought in 1974. I reimbursed the $400 the next Christmas, called it a holiday gift. She cried for a while and then told me Diane had been by twice that month to ask about a wreath on her door. That's the climate I'm describing. Cedar Hollow wasn't a neighborhood. It was a hostage situation with mailboxes. Diane's husband was Howard. Retired insurance attorney, gold cufflinks at board meetings, smiled the particular way men smile when they think their wife's hobby is harmless, and her hobby is, in fact, terrorizing 70-year-old widows over paint. Howard drafted demand letters on his old firm's letterhead, which I'm fairly sure wasn't legal, and most homeowners, seeing the letterhead and the bar number and the words forced sale proceedings, paid the fine and stopped pushing back. I had one of his letters in a manila folder in my kitchen drawer. By year 5, the folder was an inch thick. By year 8, closer to 2. Which brings me to bylaw section 4.12. Plain English. Section 4.12 says the HOA can conduct exterior inspections, siding, roof, driveway, things visible from the sidewalk with 14 days written notice. That's it. There is no interior access clause. There has never been one. Diane had been using section 4.12 as if it were a master key for 2 years, walking into about a dozen homes that way, not by breaking in, but by intimidating elderly homeowners into opening the door while she waved the orange notice and said bylaw 4.12 like an incantation. Nobody had said no, until that Tuesday. She came to my house specifically because of the 3rd notice in 6 weeks. The first 2 had been mailed, citing different fabricated bylaws each time. I'd ignored the first. I'd responded to the second by certified mail asking her to provide the specific statutory basis for interior access. She never replied. The 3rd one she hand-delivered, with backup, what she didn't know, what she could not possibly have known, because I never told her, and Megan and I weren't the kind of married couple that advertised our jobs at neighborhood barbecues, was that my wife had been a 911 dispatcher for 13 years, the last 8 at the County Emergency Communications Center. She was a senior dispatcher with supervisor credentials. And she was working the long Tuesday shift, 6 in the evening to 6 in the morning. 7:30 p.m. Megan texted me. Quiet so far, knock on wood. 7:42 p.m. Diane pressed call. 7:43 p.m. The line opened on my wife's console. I didn't know that yet. Standing on my porch with my coffee. I knew Megan was at work. I knew it was her shift. I hadn't done the math, but I had decided, weeks earlier, how I was going to handle Diane Holloway. I wasn't going to raise my voice. I wasn't going to lie. I wasn't going to sign anything she handed me. I was going to document. To wait. To let her make the next move, and the one after that, and keep every piece of paper, every recording, every camera frame, in a folder thick enough to break a court table. Calm, controlled, a little ironic. That was the plan. I'd made the plan in my kitchen, with the manila folder open in front of me. I hadn't planned for the part where she called my wife. That part was a gift. The County Emergency Communications Center is 18 miles from Cedar Hollow Drive, on the 3rd floor of a beige government building near the interstate. The room is darker than people imagine. Most of the light comes from the consoles, 6 of them, arranged in a horseshoe. At 7:43 p.m. that Tuesday, the console at the second seat from the left chirped. Megan was on her ergonomic chair with a thermos of decaf and a sweater pulled around her shoulders. Her supervisor, Frank, 26 years on the job, was at the seat to her right, working through a non-emergency about a barking dog. The address populated on her screen automatically, 1428 Cedar Hollow, Dr. She did not visibly react. 6 weeks later, Frank would tell investigators he hadn't noticed anything unusual about her. She picked up the call the way she picks up every call. That sentence would become the most important one in the entire case. She pressed the headset button. 911, what's the address of your emergency? A voice came through that she'd heard at 3 HOA holiday parties and once on the local news. Yes, I need an officer at 1428 Cedar Hollow Drive. I'm the HOA president, Diane Holloway, and the homeowner is refusing a lawful entry. Megan typed the address into the CAD field. Her fingers didn't pause. Her voice stayed exactly where it had been. Ma'am, what is the nature of the emergency? The homeowner is obstructing an authorized HOA inspection. I need an officer to remove him from the doorway. There are about 40 standard questions a dispatcher asks on a 911 call. And the order is not random. It's designed to build a clean record, keep the caller talking, and find out whether anyone is actually in danger. Megan went to question 2. Ma'am, is anyone injured? No. Is anyone being threatened? A pause. He's hostile. She typed. Caller states subject is hostile. No specific threat described. Ma'am, is the resident armed or behaving violently? He's just standing there. But he won't move. He won't move from where, ma'am? From his own doorway. Frank, 4 feet away, was still typing about the dog. He hadn't looked up. Megan asked the next question in the same tone she would use to ask a stranger if they took cream in their coffee. Ma'am, do you have a court order or a warrant authorizing entry to this property? In the playback later, the silence on the line lasted 3 full seconds. 3 seconds is a long time on a 911 call. I don't need one. I'm the HOA president. The bylaws give me authority. Megan typed, caller states no warrant. Cites OA bylaws as authority for entry. Ma'am, is the resident the legal owner of the property? Yes, but that doesn't. Has the resident given verbal or written consent to enter? He's refusing, that's why I called you. Ma'am, I'm noting in the log that you have no warrant, no court order, no homeowner consent, and the resident is on his own property. Please stay on the line. Officers will be dispatched. Do not enter the residence. There is a particular silence that follows a sentence like that. It's the silence of someone realizing the person they called isn't on their side. Diane recovered fast. Yes. Fine. Send someone now, but the silence had happened, and the recording had captured it. Megan dispatched Unit 14. Deputy Reyes, 4 minutes out, finishing a sandwich at a gas station. She flagged the call as non-emergency, civil dispute, possible HOA matter. She did not flag it as exigent. She did not whisper anything to Frank. She did not pull up the homeowner name on her secondary screen. She didn't need to. The address was enough, and she had already done the only thing she was allowed to do, which was her job. Here's why that mattered, and why, 6 weeks later, it kept the entire case from collapsing. If Megan had slipped, if she had so much as said, "Sir, please remain on the porch," in a voice that hinted she knew me, Diane's attorney would have eaten the case alive. Bias. Megan's career, the recording, the CAD log, the whole evidentiary foundation would have been compromised. She didn't slip. She asked the questions in training order, in her training voice, and let Diane Holloway answer them on a recorded line that the sheriff's office, the DA, and a state administrative agency would all eventually have access to. Every answer was a brick. 4 minutes in, Diane had built herself a wall, and she didn't know what was on the other side of it. Back on my porch, I couldn't hear any of it. I could hear Diane's half the loud half, meant for the neighbors and the open windows. I heard her say hostile twice. I heard her say HOA president 4 times. I heard her say bylaws once, late, with less confidence than the first 3. I watched her face. Her smirk hadn't come back since the small slip at the start. Her free hand had drifted from her hip to her clipboard and was now tapping the orange notice in a little rhythm she didn't know she was making. She lowered the phone. "Officers are coming," she said again. The line was meant to threaten. It came out like she was reassuring herself. "I know," I said. "I'm right here. You should open the door. My doorbell camera disagrees." She looked up at the camera then. For the first time, her eyes traveled from the lens to the door to her phone, and she did a small math problem in her head, and the answer made her face go still for half a second. The kind of stillness that happens when a person realizes they might have miscalculated and then immediately decides they haven't, because admitting it is harder than continuing. She lifted the phone back to her ear. "Yes, I'm still on the line." "He's yes. We'll wait." The 2 board members on my lawn looked at each other. Bill, I think his name was Bill, took a small step backward toward the sidewalk. The other one kept photographing my front window with grim determination. Across the street, Mrs. Alvarez set her watering can down on her porch railing. She did not go back inside. No warrant, no injury, no danger, no consent, no authority. Diane had handed the prosecution the entire case in 8 questions. The woman building that file was sitting 18 miles away, in a dark room with 6 consoles, typing official notes in CAD and handwriting private ones in the margin. "Husband at this address. Call quality professional." Requesting supervisor review the kind of clean, transparent notes that get reviewed the next morning and entered into the personnel record as exemplary handling under personal conflict of interest. No protocol violation. I didn't know about the notes yet. I would learn later. For now, I knew only that the cruiser was 4 minutes away, that the phone in Diane's hand was the most expensive object she had ever owned, and that the small, still moment on her face, the half second she'd almost done the math, was the last moment in her HOA career that she would get to feel like the one in charge. She just hadn't done the math yet. The cruiser turned onto Cedar Hollow at 7:51 p.m. 1 car. No lights. No siren. Just a white and blue sedan rolling up the street the way a cruiser rolls when dispatch has flagged the call non-emergency, civil, possible HOA matter. The driver parked behind Diane's SUV. Deputy Reyes got out, maybe 35. Calm walk, hat under his arm. He clipped his body camera on as he came up the walkway. I watched him do it. 3 recording devices now ran simultaneously. His body cam, my doorbell cam, and the county line that was still open in Diane's hand. Triple coverage, 3 angles, none of them mine. Diane lit up the moment he hit the walkway. "Finally," she said. "Officer, this man has been..." Reyes raised a polite hand. "Ma'am, I'll get to you. 1 moment, please." He turned to me. "Sir, is this your residence?" "Yes. Deeded in my name and my wife's." "Are you the resident the caller was referring to?" "I'm assuming so. She's been talking about me for the last 9 minutes." Reyes nodded once. He looked at Diane's clipboard. He looked at the 2 board members on my lawn, who had stopped photographing the moment his cruiser turned the corner. "Ma'am, you can lower the phone. I'm here. Disconnect the call." Diane hesitated. Then, "Yes. Officers have arrived. Thank you." She hung up. 18 miles away, my wife clicked a box that closed the call file, timestamped the recording, and routed it into the permanent CAD record. She moved on to her next call, the barking dog Frank had been handling, which needed a call back. She took it the same way she took every call. That detail mattered. I'd learn about it later. "Sir," Reyes said to me, "the caller stated you're refusing a lawful HOA inspection. Walk me through it." She handed me an orange notice about 6 minutes before you arrived. It cites bylaw section 4.12 and demands interior access. She crossed my threshold without permission. She called 911 when I declined to step aside. I have a printed copy of section 4.12 inside. I'd like to read it. 20 seconds inside. I came back with a printed page from my manila folder. He read it carefully, did not skim. When he was done, he folded the page and looked at Diane. Ma'am, this says exterior inspections only. 14 days written notice. That's not. There are other clauses. Ma'am, did you provide 14 days written notice for an interior inspection tonight? Yes or no? It's more complicated than yes or no. No. Did the homeowner give you consent to enter? He's required. Did he give consent, ma'am? No. Did you have a court order or warrant? I'm the court order or warrant, ma'am. Yes or no? No. Reyes let it breathe. He looked at the clipboard, reached out, turned it slightly toward him, read the date at the top. Ma'am, why is this notice dated for tomorrow? Diane opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. The board members on the lawn had gone very still. It's standard practice. We date them for a notice dated tomorrow, served today, before the inspection date. Doesn't grant authority for an inspection happening today. Even if section 4.12 covered interior access, which it doesn't, the date alone makes this invalid. He handed the clipboard back. Politely, without breaking eye contact. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step off this property. Picture this from the street, because the street was watching. Mrs. Alvarez had not moved from her porch. Mr. Patel was now at his mailbox, which suddenly required attention. 2 more porch lights were on that hadn't been on 5 minutes earlier. A newer neighbor woman, year on the street, maybe stood in her driveway with arms folded. Diane Holloway, HOA, president of 6 years. The woman who had walked into a dozen kitchens by waving section 4.12 like a master key, was being told to leave my porch by a deputy who had read her own bylaw and found it wanting. The whole street saw it. Bill took the cue and walked, careful and casual, back to his car. Didn't look at Diane, didn't look at me. Got in. The other board member, heavier, mustache, kept his clipboard but lowered it. Stopped photographing. Diane did not move. This is harassment. I'm the HOA president. I have. Ma'am, I'm not arresting you. I'm asking you to step off this property. The homeowner has not consented to your presence. You have no warrant, no consent, no statutory basis. Please walk to your vehicle. I want to file a report against him. Ma'am, you already filed a report. The 911 call is your report. It will be reviewed. Please step off the property. She stepped off, slowly, shoulders straight, like a woman walking off a stage in a play she'd badly misread. She got to the sidewalk and turned back. This isn't over. The board meets Thursday. You'll regret this. Reyes did not turn around. He was looking at me. Sir, do you want to file any complaint regarding tonight? I'd like a copy of the incident report and a case number for my records. You'll have both by tomorrow afternoon. He wrote a case number on a small card and handed it to me. Body cam footage from tonight is available through a public records request to the sheriff's office. Case numbers on the card. Understood. Have a good evening. He walked back to his cruiser. Didn't say anything to Diane on the way. Pulled away at the same unhurried pace he'd arrived at. The mustache board member finally walked off my lawn, ended up in Bill's car, and then Bill's car was gone too. Diane stood alone on the sidewalk in front of my house. Eventually she walked back to her SUV, put the clipboard in the passenger seat with too much force, slammed the door. The dome light lit her face for a second and went out. She sat in the dark SUV, engine off. 3 minutes. Mrs. Alvarez watched the entire thing from her porch. I picked up my coffee mug. The coffee had gone cold. I held it anyway. I want to be honest about what I felt. I didn't feel triumph. I felt something colder and more careful, the way a man feels when he's been right about something for a long time and finally has external confirmation the world agrees with him. Diane drove off, eventually, past Mrs. Alvarez, past Mr. Patel, past the new neighbor, 20 miles an hour down Cedar Hollow Drive, and every porch she passed had a person on it. Every one of them watched her go. She'd threatened me with Thursday. The board met Thursday. I would go to the meeting. But first, in the morning, I would do one specific thing. I would file a public records request with the county clerk for the official audio and CAD transcript of the 911 call placed from this address at 7:42 p.m. I would pay the fee. I would get a confirmation number. I would obtain it the way any member of the public would obtain it. Through the front door, not through my wife. That distinction was going to matter. The Cedar Hollow Community Clubhouse is a low brick building at the entrance to the subdivision. The main room holds about 40 folding chairs. On Thursday at 6:55 p.m., every chair was occupied. A normal Cedar Hollow board meeting draws 12 people. I'd been to 4 in 8 years. The most crowded had been the pool fees meeting in 2019, which Diane had called an unprecedented turnout, 30 people. This Thursday had 40 in chairs and 6 standing along the back wall. Mrs. Alvarez was in the front row, Mr. Patel 3 rows back. The new neighbor woman from across the street, faces I'd seen at the mailbox but never spoken to. The news, as they say, had traveled. I took a seat in the 3rd row, notepad on my knee, phone openly on the armrest, recording. Tom Treasurer, mid-50s, had voted with Diane on every fine I could remember, looked at my phone. Tom looked away from my phone. At 7 sharp, Diane Holloway walked in from a side door. Navy blazer she had not been wearing on Tuesday. Pearls. Hair set. She set a manila folder on the head table, adjusted the microphone, and called the meeting to order. Good evening. We have a number of items, but I'd like to begin with a matter of community discipline that arose Tuesday evening. I raised one hand, polite. She saw me, pretended she didn't. I stood up. Before the meeting begins, I said calm, the voice I used at work, I'd like the record to reflect that I'm openly recording this meeting per state open meeting statute. My phone is on the armrest. Recording started at 6:58 p.m. The room got quiet. Diane looked up slowly. A beat too long. That is duly noted. I sat back down. She drew a breath. As I was saying, on Tuesday evening, I attempted to conduct a routine HOA inspection. The homeowner was uncooperative, hostile, and physically obstructed the inspection. I was forced to contact law enforcement to ensure my safety. I am bringing this before the board tonight because the homeowner's conduct represents a serious violation of community standards. She paused. Read the silence as agreement. Pressed on. I am proposing tonight that this board approve a compliance lien of $14,500 against the property at 1,428 Cedar Hollow Drive for obstruction of inspection, hostility toward the HOA president, and continued refusal to comply under Section 4.12. The room went so still you could hear the air conditioning click. Quick, plain English. A compliance lien is a legal claim against the property. Unpaid long enough, the HOA can move to foreclose, lose the house. That was the stakes. 7:07 p.m. on a Thursday. I stood up again. Madam President, may I respond before the board votes? You may speak when the agenda allows. Bylaw Section 3.4 states, any homeowner subject to a proposed lien has the right to be heard before a vote. I'd like to exercise that right. Diane's jaw tightened. She knew Section 3.4. She had cited it herself in reverse, against another homeowner. She could not deny it without looking exactly the way she was about to look anyway. Briefly, I stood straight, did not move from my row, spoke twice. First, I'd like the record to reflect that the inspection cited has no legal basis under Section 4.12, which governs exterior inspections with 14 days written notice and does not, anywhere in its 46 lines, mention interior access. Deputy Reyes of the County Sheriff's Office confirmed this on my walkway Tuesday, in the presence of Diane Holloway, 2 HOA board members, and at least 6 neighbors. I paused. Tom was looking at his hands. Second, I'd like the record to reflect that a 911 call was placed from my front porch at 7:42 p.m. Tuesday by Diane Holloway, in which she stated to a county dispatcher that I was, quote, hostile. That call is on a recorded line. It is the subject of an active public records request I filed this morning. The room did not breathe. That is what I'd like reflected. Thank you. I sat down. Diane's right hand went to the edge of her folder. Her left was flat on the table. She had not blinked in about 6 seconds. I watched her face do, in real time, the same small calculation it had done on my porch on Tuesday, the almost math, and watched her, in real time, decide not to do it. She lifted her chin. The board will vote. All in favor? 3 hands. Tom, Carol, Greg, the mustache man from my lawn. All opposed? 2. Ravi and Lynn. 3-2. The motion passed. A compliance lien for $14,500 was now legally filed against 1,428 Cedar Hollow Drive. The motion carries. Moving to the next item, a hand went up in the front row. Mrs. Alvarez. Diane saw it, pretended not to. The next item is the landscaping budget. Madam President. Thin voice, clear. The room turned. I have a question. Diane could not refuse. Not with 40 people watching. Yes, Mrs. Alvarez. What is the bylaw number that allows interior inspections? The silence had texture this time. Diane's mouth moved. That is a matter for committee review, and is not. What is the bylaw number? I will not be taking questions outside of the agenda. There isn't one, is there? The room moved, not toward Mrs. Alvarez, just moved. A shift across 40 chairs. The new neighbor woman crossed her arms. Mr. Patel set his pen down. Tom looked at the table. Lynn looked at Mrs. Alvarez with something close to relief. Diane did not answer. She moved to the landscaping budget. The landscaping budget took 11 minutes. Nobody in the room was listening to the landscaping budget. The meeting adjourned at 8:14 p.m. I walked out alone, did not stop to talk to anyone, did not look at Diane, got to my car in the parking lot and sat in the driver's seat for a minute before starting the engine. Diane had filed a lien on my house. She had also stood at a microphone in front of 40 neighbors and said, on a recording I controlled, that I had been hostile and had physically obstructed an inspection. The 911 audio 3 to 5 business days away would show I had said 11 words in 9 minutes and had not moved from my own doorway. The doorbell cam would show I had not lifted a hand. Reyes's body cam would show I had been polite enough to say thank you for coming out. Defamation, in this state, requires a false statement of fact, published to a third party, that damages reputation. She had just done all 3 in front of 40 witnesses. My phone had been on the armrest the whole time, in my hand walking out. A notepad, a phone with a time-stamped meeting recording, a sheriff's case number card, a county records confirmation, number 2024 CR 04481, and waiting on my kitchen counter, an unopened certified envelope from Howard. I drove home. 12 minutes. Walked past the doorbell camera that hadn't stopped recording since Tuesday. Let myself into the house I now had a $14,500 lien against. Megan was on shift. The kitchen was quiet. I sat at the table. Opened the envelope. Diane had put it all on the record. The lie at 7:47 Tuesday. The lie at 7:23 Thursday. The lien with her signature on it. 3 weapons in one hand. And she still didn't know whose voice she had been lying to on Tuesday night. Howard's letter was 3 pages. It was printed on letterhead from a firm called Holloway, Bremer and Voss, LLP. A firm that, as I learned the next morning with about 4 minutes of searching, had dissolved in 2019. Howard had retired from it that year. The letterhead was, in every legal sense, fictional. He had kept the stationery the way Diane kept the laminated SUV placard, as a costume. The letter began, "Dear Sir." It did not use my name. It informed me that, pursuant to a duly approved HOA compliance lien of $14,500, I had 90 days to remit payment or face foreclosure proceedings. It cited 4 statutes. 3 were real. 1 did not exist. Howard had transposed 2 digits, which I noticed because that's the kind of person I am. The paragraph I read 3 times sat in the middle of page 2. Please be advised that the homeowner's continued resistance to lawful HOA authority, including but not limited to the events of Tuesday, May 14, has been documented by multiple witnesses and law enforcement. Any further obstruction will be treated as evidence of bad faith and may result in additional civil action. Howard, 31 years of practice, had just put in writing that law enforcement had documented my resistance, when in fact, law enforcement had documented his wife's lack of warrant, consent, or statutory authority and had asked her to step off my property. The letter closed with the futility of resistance and a signature he had practiced. I put it in the manila folder, which now needed a second rubber band. It was 9:12 p.m. Thursday. Megan would be home at 6:30 a.m. I made a list on a yellow legal pad. The next 4 days were not dramatic. They were the opposite of dramatic. They were the kind of patient, slow, paperwork days that made everything in the room on Thursday possible. Friday morning, county clerk's office at 8:30 a.m., 15-minute line. When I got to the window, I told the clerk, Janelle, 19 years on the job that I was following up on records request 2024CR04481, she typed. The audio file and CAD transcript would be ready Monday. The request had a small fee, $14 for audio, $8 for transcript, $3 for certification, and I paid cash. She handed me a yellow receipt with a stamp. Paid certified copy requested. I did not call Megan that morning. I did not ask her to pull the file. I did not ask her to confirm anything about the recording. Megan and I had not spoken about the call. She had come home Wednesday morning at 6:30, made tea, sat at the kitchen table, and said, "I took a call from this address Tuesday night. I followed protocol. I've requested supervisor review of my handling. I'm not going to discuss the contents with you until the case is closed or until you have the recording through public records." I had said, "Understood," she had said. "Thank you." That had been the entire conversation. We had then made eggs. Most couples would have leaned across the table and whispered. We did not. Megan had walled the call off completely until I held the certified copy in my hand. She had done it without me asking. She had been a dispatcher for 13 years, and she knew, in a way most people didn't, how easy it was to destroy a case by saying the wrong thing across a kitchen table. So we made eggs. Friday afternoon, I called the sheriff's department, asked for Deputy Reyes's report. Got the email at 4:47 p.m. 2 pages. The line I lingered on. Homeowner remained on his porch and did not raise voice or move from doorway at any point during interaction. I added the report to the folder. Saturday morning, Mrs. Alvarez knocked on my door at 9:15 a.m. with a shoebox. She was wearing a cardigan and the expression of a woman who had decided something she had not allowed herself to decide before. She did not come inside. She handed me the shoebox on the same porch Diane had stood on 4 days earlier, and she said, "I heard you mention a recorded line at the meeting. I have something for you." 4 years of HOA correspondence. Fine letters. Photographs of her mailbox. A receipt for the $400 she had paid in 2021. 3 wreath violation notices. And 1 handwritten note Diane's handwriting, no letterhead, that read, "Mrs. Alvarez, if you continue to argue these fines, the board will take steps that may result in loss of your home. D. Holloway." I held that note for a long time. Mrs. Alvarez watched me read it. She did not cry. She had cried, I suspected, in 2021. She had decided sometime in the last 4 days that she was done crying. "I'm tired," she said. "Use what you need. I'll only need a little of this. Then take what you need. I don't want the rest in my house." She walked back across the street. She did not look back. Sunday morning. I drafted a letter to Howard. 3 lines. I read it back, deleted the please, and rewrote it. "Howard acknowledged receipt of your demand letter dated Thursday. Materials of record will be presented at the next board meeting. Ensure your wife is present. Mailed certified. Receipt to the folder." Howard would open the letter Monday. He would not understand what materials of record meant. He would assume the worst version he could imagine, which would be wrong, because the actual version was worse. He would tell Diane the homeowner had folded. He would pour himself a drink. Sunday night. I made an inventory at the kitchen table. As of Sunday, May 19, 10:14 p.m., in my possession. Printed section 4.12, exterior only language highlighted. Certified mail receipt for my response to Diane's second inspection notice, 3 weeks before the porch incident, requesting statutory basis. She never replied. Deputy Reyes's incident report. Sheriff's case number card. Body cam, available via public records. Time-stamped audio of Thursday's board meeting, including Diane's hostile and physically obstructed statements, plus Mrs. Alvarez's unanswered question. Pending records request 2024C R04481 for the 911 audio. Howard's letter on dissolved firm letterhead, citing 1 non-existent statute, claiming law enforcement had documented my resistance. Diane's handwritten note from the shoebox. Certified mail receipt for my response to Howard. The folder needed a 3rd rubber band. I did not feel angry. The anger had moved through me on Tuesday and Wednesday. What was left was a quiet, careful, almost cold attentiveness, the way you feel when you are about to do something irreversible to someone who has spent 6 years doing irreversible things and assuming nobody would return the favor. I did not feel triumphant either. I knew Thursday was going to be public. I knew Diane was going to discover, in front of 40 neighbors, who had been on the other end of the 911 line. I knew she was going to discover it the way she had made other people discover things without warning, in a room of witnesses, with no chance to recover. It was going to be the worst night of her HOA presidency. I was not going to enjoy it. I was going to be there. Monday morning, Janelle called at 11:08 a.m. audio and transcript ready. I drove to the clerk's office, paid the certification stamp, walked out with a sealed manila envelope. Inside, one USB drive with the original audio, one certified CAD transcript with timestamps, dispatcher questions, caller responses, and the closing summary. No warrant. No homeowner consent. No statutory basis for entry asserted by caller. Subject of complaint remained on personal property throughout interaction. One certification stamp confirming true and accurate copy. I sat in my car in the clerk's lot for a minute. The USB was in my shirt pocket. The transcript was on the passenger seat. I had obtained the main weapon through the front door. Through a 15-minute line, a $25 fee, a yellow receipt, and a clerk named Janelle, who had no idea what she had just handed me. Not through my wife. Not through any back channel. Not through anything Howard could ever argue was tainted or improperly accessed. Megan had not pulled the file. Megan had not seen the file since Tuesday night. Megan would not see the file again until I played it in public Thursday, at which point she would hear it the same way the rest of the room heard it. Through the front door, that distinction, the small, boring, paperwork distinction between retrieved by spouse and retrieved by public records request, was the difference between a clean case and a thrown-out one. Howard, with his 31 years and his fictional letterhead, was going to find that out Thursday. I drove home with the USB in my pocket. Thursday was 3 days away. Diane was almost certainly across town, telling Howard the homeowner had folded. She still did not know whose voice she had been lying to on Tuesday night. She had less than 72 hours left to figure it out before the room would figure it out for her. I arrived at the clubhouse at 6:43. The parking lot was already half full. By 7, there would be 62 people in a room built for 40. I carried a slim black laptop bag. Inside, one USB drive, one certified manila envelope, a printed copy of Deputy Reyes' incident report, a single page from Mrs. Alvarez's shoebox, the printed section 4.12, and a small Bluetooth speaker the size of a paperback. No legal pad, no notes, no prepared remarks. I had decided in the car I would say as few words as possible. I took the same chair as last Thursday, third row, aisle. I did not turn around. I could hear the room filling behind me. I had requested time on the agenda by email Monday afternoon. Lynn had confirmed. Top of the agenda. L. At 6:58, Megan walked in. Jeans, gray sweater, wedding ring, nothing identifying. She took a seat in the last row, by the back wall. She did not look at me. I did not look at her. She had a small notebook in her lap and was already making notes on the room. She had told me, 2 nights before, that she wanted to be there not as my wife, as a witness. Her supervisor, Frank, had cleared it. She was off shift. She was, in every way that mattered, an attendee. At 7, Diane Holloway walked in. Navy blazer, no pearls, hair less set than last week. Howard came in 3 steps behind, first time he had ever attended a meeting, and took a seat at the head table beside her, which was not where guests sat. Lynn watched him sit and made a small mark in her notes. Diane opened the meeting at 7:02. Good evening. The first item is a response from the homeowner at 1,428 Cedar Hollow regarding the compliance lien approved last week. He has 10 minutes. I stood up. I walked to the public comment podium 3 feet from the head table. I unzipped my bag, took out the manila envelope, took out the Bluetooth speaker, set it on the podium, and turned it on. It chirped, paired with my phone, and the indicator went green. Diane watched all of this without speaking. I took out a small stack of printed CAD transcripts, 5 copies, and walked them to the head table one at a time. Tom, Carol, Greg, Ravi, Lynn. I handed Howard one as well. He took it without looking at me. Diane did not receive a copy. I returned to the podium. Before I begin recording, started at 6:58 p.m. per state open meeting statute. The room was completely silent. I could hear the air conditioning click. I'd like to enter 4 items into the record. The first is an audio file. I pressed play. The Bluetooth speaker, 6 inches from Diane's microphone, filled the room with my wife's voice. 911, what's the address of your emergency? The voice was professional, neutral, the voice of a dispatcher who had taken thousands of calls. And then through the same speaker, Diane's voice. Loud, performative, the voice she had used at this same microphone last Thursday. Yes, I need an officer at 1428 Cedar Hollow Drive. I'm the HOA president, Diane Holloway, and the homeowner is refusing a lawful entry. 62 people heard Diane Holloway introduce herself on a recorded line. I watched her face. It was the same almost math expression from my porch, except this time the audio kept playing. Ma'am, is anyone injured? No. Is anyone being threatened? He's hostile. Somewhere behind me, someone exhaled. Ma'am, do you have a court order or a warrant authorizing entry? 3 full seconds of silence on the recording. The room counted them with it. I don't need one. I'm the HOA president. The bylaws give me authority. That was the sentence that did it. 62 people simultaneously realized that the same sentence they had heard, in some form, for 6 years, had just been said by Diane Holloway to a 911 dispatcher who had then asked her, on a recorded line, if she had homeowner consent, no, a court order, no, and whether the resident had given consent to enter, no, that's why I called you. The room did not gasp. The room contracted. 62 backs stiffened. Lynn set her pen down. Tom looked at his transcript, then at Diane, then back at the transcript. Greg pulled his copy closer and started reading. Ravi did not move, he was waiting. Carol looked at her hands. Diane's mouth was slightly open. The recording kept playing. The dispatcher's voice. Ma'am, I'm noting in the log that you have no warrant, no court order, no homeowner consent, and the resident is on his own property. Please stay on the line. I let it play another 30 seconds through Diane's yes, fine, send someone now, through the dispatcher's close. Then I paused it. The silence after was the loudest silence I have ever stood in. I waited. In the back row, a woman stood up. Megan. She did not raise her voice. She did not walk to the front. She stood in her gray sweater at her seat in the last row, and she spoke clearly enough to be heard at the head table. For the record, I was the dispatcher who took that call Tuesday night at 7:42 p.m. I did not know the address was my husband's until it appeared on my console. I followed standard protocol. The recording, the CAD log, and my supervisor's review of my handling are available to this board on request. I requested supervisor review of my own conduct, and that review confirmed no protocol violation. I am here tonight as a member of the public. She sat back down. Diane's head turned toward the back of the room. Slowly. Her eyes found Megan. Her eyes matched the voice she had heard 3 times in 2 minutes to the face. Her eyes registered the gray sweater, the last row, the spouse row. Her eyes registered me at the podium. Her eyes registered the 18 feet between us. Her eyes did the math. She did not get to undo it this time. Diane Holloway's face went the color of paper. Howard set down his pen. The room behind me made a sound I have never heard a room make before. The sound of 62 people exhaling at the same time, very slowly, through their noses. I waited a beat. 3 more items. Briefly. I held up the CAD transcript. Item 1. The certified county transcript. The closing summary. Page 3. No warrant. No homeowner consent. No statutory basis for entry asserted by caller. I held up Reyes's report. Item 2. Deputy Reyes's incident report. Page 2. Homeowner remained on his porch and did not raise voice or move from doorway at any point during interaction. Item 3. I cued the doorbell cam clip. 10 seconds. Diane's voice, I have HOA authority to enter any unit in this subdivision, filled the room. I stopped the playback. That is the on-property record of the same call. I picked up the printed section 4.12 but did not raise it. The bylaw cited as the basis for entry is section 4.12. I will read the relevant clause once. I read it. Exterior inspections only. 14 days written notice. No mention of interior access in the 46 lines. I set the paper down. Thank you. I sat down. I did not look at Megan. Megan did not look at me. We had agreed, in the car the previous night, that we would exchange no signals in the room. The case had been help enough. The room was looking at Diane. Diane was looking at the printed CAD transcript Tom had slid across the table, reading her own words back to herself in the silence. Lynn stood up. Madam President, I move that the compliance lien filed last week against 1428 Cedar Hollow Drive be rescinded immediately, with a formal apology entered into the minutes. Ravi. Seconded. Tom looked at the transcript in his own hands, looked at Howard, who was looking at the table, looked at the room. All in favor? Lynn. Ravi. Tom, after a pause almost long enough to be its own statement. Greg, without eye contact. 4 hands. Carol stayed in her lap. Diane stayed in her lap. Motion carries. 4-0, 1 abstention. Leanne rescinded. Apology to be entered. The room shifted again. 62 shoulders in folding chairs, the shift of a room that had just stopped being afraid. Mrs. Alvarez stood up. She did not give a speech. She had promised she wouldn't. I would like the board to know that I have a shoebox at home of similar correspondence. Going back 4 years. I am not the only one. She sat down. 3 other hands went up. I knew 2. The third was a man in his 60s I had seen at the mailbox but never spoken to. He did not say anything. He just raised his hand. Howard stood up. He did not say anything. He walked toward the side door, with the step of a man trying not to appear to be hurrying. He stopped halfway, turned, looked at Diane. Diane did not look at him. Howard walked out. Lynn turned to Diane. Second motion. That this board open a formal review of the past 6 years of HOA enforcement actions under the current presidency. Outside auditor. Funded by the association. Ravi. Seconded. Tom raised his hand before the vote was called. 4 hands. Carol's in her lap. Diane's in her lap. Motion carries. 4-0, 1 abstention. Review within 30 days. The meeting did not formally adjourn for 16 more minutes. Budget. Landscaping. A water bill discrepancy. Nobody listened. The room was no longer in the agenda. Diane did not speak again. When the meeting adjourned at 8:38, she stood, picked up her folder, and walked out of the side door alone. Howard was not in the parking lot. He had driven home 20 minutes before the meeting ended. I packed up the speaker and the envelope. Megan was already gone. She had left during the second vote, quietly, the way she had arrived. The job had been done. I walked out alone. Mrs. Alvarez was on the sidewalk outside the clubhouse. She put a hand on my arm briefly, the way an older woman touches your arm when she does not need to say anything, and then she walked to her car. I drove home with the laptop bag on the passenger seat. 6 years of Diane Holloway's HOA presidency had ended in 84 minutes, in a room full of her own neighbors, by means of a recording she had made herself, on a line she had called herself, against a homeowner whose wife she had never bothered to learn the name of. She had spent 6 years teaching this street that the loudest voice wins. It turned out the quietest voice, the one on the recorded line, asking simple procedural questions, was the one that ended her. She had picked up the phone, thinking she was calling the law. She had no idea she was calling my wife. And my wife, bless her, had just done her job. 6 weeks later, on a Saturday in late June, I was on my porch with a cup of coffee. Same porch. Same hour of evening around 7:30, sun behind the maples, light going soft and orange. Same mug. Same doorbell camera 6 inches above the same doorframe. Still running, recording nothing of interest. A boy from 2 streets over rode past on a bicycle. A dog barked, once, and stopped. That was the only sound on Cedar Hollow Drive. The legal payoff came in 3 pieces. The first arrived 8 days after the meeting. The Cedar Hollow HOA, by special election, voted to remove Diane Holloway as president. 62-14. Mrs. Alvarez told me, on her porch one afternoon, that she had voted, that her hands had not shaken when she did it, and that she had cried in her car afterward. Not from sadness, she said, but from the surprise of finding out she could. Lynn became interim president. Ravi became vice president. Tom remained treasurer, and in the weeks following the Thursday meeting, wrote a quiet 2-page memo recommending all fines from Diane's tenure be audited and refunded where unsupported. The memo was not glamorous. Tom was not glamorous, but the memo existed. The second piece arrived 2 weeks later. A certified envelope from the county DA's office. Misdemeanor charges had been filed against Diane Holloway for false report to a 911 dispatcher and misuse of emergency services. Maximum penalty in this state: 1 year county jail and a $2,500 fine. The DA had reviewed the certified audio, the CAD transcript, Reyes's body cam, my doorbell footage, and the open meetings recording. Prosecution was, in their words, in the public interest. Arraignment scheduled for August. The third arrived 3 weeks after that. The State Bar Association opened an inquiry into Howard Holloway regarding the demand letter on dissolved firm letterhead. They asked whether I wished to file a formal complaint. I did. I attached the letter, the bar number, and a screenshot of the dissolved firm registry entry. I did not pursue civil damages against Diane. A lawyer friend told me at her kitchen table that I had a strong defamation case worth low 5 figures. I declined. I had said publicly that I considered the matter closed once the lien was rescinded. I had meant it. I had not done any of this for money. I had done it to be allowed to live in my own house without a 68-year-old woman walking into my doorway with a clipboard. The financial payoff came on its own. Diane and Howard sold the white SUV with the laminated placard. The HOA refunded $400 to Mrs. Alvarez with a letter signed by Lynn. The board has determined this fine was issued without sufficient basis. We apologize. Mrs. Alvarez framed the letter. She hung it in her hallway next to a photograph of her husband. The outside audit began in early June. By late June, the auditor had reviewed about 90 fines and recommended refunds, totaling $11,400 to 14 households. The social payoff came in pieces too quiet to itemize. 3 houses on Cedar Hollow had small handwritten signs on their porches that said only thank you, no name, no explanation. I did not know who put them there. I never asked. The signs stayed up for 2 weeks, and then, on a Sunday morning, they were all gone at once. Mrs. Alvarez repainted her mailbox, the exact shade of blue it had always been. She did it on a Saturday morning with a small can of touch-up paint, on a stepladder she should not have been on at her age. I crossed the street and held the ladder while she finished the last side. When she was done, she stepped down, looked at the mailbox, and said, "There, same blue." That was the entirety of the social payoff. Same blue. A young couple, 20s, first house, both on their phones half the time, moved into the property Greg the mustache man had quietly sold 3 weeks after the meeting. Mrs. Alvarez crossed their lawn the day they moved in, carrying a plate of cookies and a printed copy of the revised Cedar Hollow bylaws. Lynn had rewritten them with help from a paralegal in town, and they now ran to 9 pages instead of 40. I watched from my porch. The wife, maybe 25, laughed at something Mrs. Alvarez said. The husband smiled. They invited her in. She went in for 10 minutes and came back out with an empty plate. She crossed back and waved at me without breaking stride. I waved back. The emotional payoff is harder to describe than the legal one. Megan came home from her shift the Wednesday morning after the Thursday meeting, and we did not talk about the meeting. We made eggs. We drank coffee. She told me about a 3 a.m. call from a woman whose cat was stuck in a kitchen cabinet. We laughed for the first time in 2 weeks. Frank, her supervisor, wrote her a formal commendation for her handling of the call from our address. It was entered into her personnel file. It read, in part, "Dispatcher demonstrated exemplary professional discipline under circumstances of personal conflict of interest, including but not limited to the dispatcher's complete refusal to discuss or disclose call content outside official channels for the duration of the investigation. No protocol violation occurred at any point." Megan read the commendation once, folded it, and put it in a drawer. She did not show it to me. Frank did. Frank brought a copy to our house the following weekend, handed it to me on the porch, and said, "She'll never show you this, so I will." I read it with the same coffee mug in my hand that had been there 6 weeks earlier on the night of the porch. I did not cry. I am not the kind of man who cries easily, but I sat with it for a while, and Megan came out onto the porch and sat next to me, and we did not say anything for about 10 minutes. That was the emotional payoff. She had been, from beginning to end, the only person in the entire story who never raised her voice, including me. I want to close where I began. On my porch, on a Saturday in late June, with the same coffee mug, and the same doorbell camera, and the same maples behind the cul-de-sac. The orange interior inspection notice from that Tuesday, 6 weeks earlier, was framed on the wall of my home office, where I could see it from my desk. It had become a kind of joke, but not a cruel one. I had made it small. The frame was the cheapest kind, plain wood, drugstore. Underneath the orange paper, I had taped a small handwritten label that read only, Bylaw Section 4.12, Exterior Only. That was all. No date, no name, no commentary. I had not done any of this to make Diane Holloway see something. I had done it so I could sit on my own porch on a Saturday evening with a cup of coffee and my wife somewhere inside the house humming to herself in the kitchen, and not worry about who was walking up my driveway. That had been the entire point. It had always been the entire point. The doorbell camera was still running. It was not recording anything important. It would, I suspected, never record anything important again. Across the street, Mrs. Alvarez was on her own porch, in a rocking chair I had not known she owned, reading a paperback with the spine cracked open across her knee. She was not watching anyone. She was just reading. Megan came out onto the porch with her own mug and sat down in the chair next to mine. She did not say anything for a while. Then, "How's the coffee?" "It's cold. I'll make a fresh pot. I'll come help." We stood up together and went inside. The screen door swung shut behind us. The orange notice was on the office wall as we passed it. Neither of us looked at it. The sun finished going down behind the maples on the far side of the cul-de-sac, and the porch light clicked on automatically, 6 weeks to the day later, on a quiet street where the loudest voice no longer won.